let's just get right into it. It's a Disintegrate build guide. And I was talking with Perry, the pig, not the platypus, unfortunately. No shade to Perry the pig, but I was talking with him and I mentioned that this build didn't have to dodge the Jewelry Slam. Maybe the damage was not great, but it was pretty tanky. So that's what we're going to be showing at the top of the video, because that's what he said to do. If you can tank the Jewelry Slam, that's what you put at the beginning of the video. So let's do that. First, we're going to warm up our lasers. We got 2 charges now. We don't have to do this, but it makes the damage look a little bit more impressive at least. All right, and here we're going to take this slam. All right, well, let's try that again, huh? All right, well, we're back. We're going to try this again. That was my bad. I should not have warmed up the lasers. We'll just go right into it this time. And then we're going to show you tanking the slam. You do have to tap Flame Ward here. All right, we're going to run it back. We're back again. This time we've taken our weapon off. We're good to go. Gonna go tank the slam. Right? Let's see if we can tank it. You kind of see that we, oh, and then we just stood on the puddle for an absurd amount of time. But yeah, there you go. Can tank the slam. You have to be really careful about how much damage you're doing, or you kill her before she slams, and then it's very, very difficult to tank. I also don't have cleanse on my belt here, so you did see me chugging a few potions, and then of course standing in the void pedal, which was also just a terrible idea, but I wasn't paying attention. You don't have to pay that much attention though, which is great. Alright, we're back again and again. Regular Aberoth, not Uberoth. Be really cool if this was an Uberoth fight. That'd be a lot more impressive. Not an Uberoth fight. That said, hopefully you're still a little bit impressed. And again, you can tank the Aberoth Slam too. It does take up all of our charges of Flame Ward and all of our potions, but we can do it. And you probably shouldn't stand in the lasers, not because they're going to kill you, but because they slow you down. You get frailty, you do less damage. So there you go. That's Aberoth. Alright, I recorded another video. It got really long and rambly. It took about 40 minutes. And it did go into a lot of, like, why am I doing this and not this? You probably don't care that much. Maybe I'll upload that video later if you want to. And you can see it to go really in-depth on the build and why it is doing what it is doing. So I'm re-recording this. I just want to take up a moment while I'm in the monolith here to say if you have any thoughts on the build, if you have any ideas on how to prove it, if you have any questions about the build, I'd love to hear about them in the comments. You can like and subscribe and share if you want, but I almost never upload any videos. I was just really excited about this particular build. I was really excited to show it off, kind of proud of it. So I wanted to get this up. So yeah, that's what's going on here. I'd love to hear from you if you have any thoughts on it, because I would love to take down Uber Aberoth with this build. I can't. Maybe it can. Maybe somebody else can come up with some incredible improvements on it that would really bring it across the line, give it enough damage and survivability to do that fight. Otherwise, if somebody out there is essentially a professional gamer, really knows that fight, wants to try and take this build and beat Aberoth with it, I'd love to see that. That would be really cool. But otherwise, yeah, here's the monolith, here's the video. I'm going to go in and explain essentially how the build works while I should be running around and showing you how. Anyway, this is kind of the monolith. It's a little bit, you can see, a little bit clunkier than just standing in one place like we were against the bosses or in an arena. But it's still not too bad. We're mostly quite tanky against everything except champions. We're going to have to fight a champion in order to finish off this monolith, so we'll see how that goes. It might not be great. You can see that we are at 1,000 corruption here, so it's certainly not a pushover build. It's doing a lot of work. Yeah, as you can see, it's like we showed off before. The damage is pretty good. So how does the build work? What's kind of the stuff going on with it? How are we doing damage with Disintegrate? And that is kind of the name of the game here, is damage with Disintegrate. You may have seen some other builds. I know Pandarandrist, I might be mispronouncing that, showed a guide last year showing off how tanky it can be, or not last year, last patch, taking down Aberoth as well, back when Aberoth was stronger, and it had a lot of tank. There's a lot of different ways to make this tanky. My goal was to make this hit hard, and holy crap, I'm missing so many points in Disintegrate here. The big trick with this build, the thing that we're doing, is using Sacrificial Embrace. With Sacrificial Embrace, you can get up to 10 stacks. When you get to 10, well, as soon as you cast an elemental spell, when you have any amount of stacks, it's going to consume all of those stacks up to 10 maximum stacks, and each one gives you 20 flat damage, 20% penetration, for a maximum total of 200 flat spell damage and 200% penetration, which is an absolutely insane amount, especially to get from gloves. Like, a good staff, a gate staff, which makes all of your mana skills cost 50% more, up to 50% more, has 120 flat damage on it. A T7 Exalted penetration on a staff is around 40%. This is giving an absolutely insane amount of damage to the build. The only downside is it says your critical strikes do not deal additional damage. And this is a critical build because of Ignivar's Head. Ignivar's Head here says Disintegrate deals more damage equal to your spell critical strike chance. The nice thing is Disintegrate doesn't actually crit, so this doesn't reduce our damage from Ignivar's Head. They just work together. We can sit here with our 446% increased spell critical strike chance, giving us almost 5.5 times more damage for Disintegrate, and that just makes us build stacks faster for Sacrificial Embrace. These go together incredibly well. They might seem a little bit counterintuitive, but because it's channeling spell, we can keep up the damage from this. Because it's a damage over time spell, it doesn't gain the penalty from this, and because it's got this offhand that makes it scale with crit, we actually aren't annoyed by the fact that we're trying to crit. All of our spells are critting all the time anyway. So it is really hard to beat the combination of these. This is essentially made for Disintegrate. Maybe it wasn't actually, but it's great for Disintegrate. And that's kind of the core of the build. So I'm going to try and go through real quick explaining the rest of the build, the different pieces that we have here. We're using Mad Alchemist Ladle. Anytime you can get a crap ton of flat damage from somewhere else, as you've seen with every Spark Charge build ever, you're going to pick up Mad Alchemist Ladle because it's up to 48% more damage. And 48% more damage is hard to beat. So we're using Mad Alchemist Ladle because, of course, we are. We're really looking for spell damage and increased spell critical strike chance. I got lucky enough to get a T7, T6 on here. This is a pretty well-rolled ladle. Ignivar's Head, as we said, is doing what it's doing. Similarly, spell damage, increased spell critical strike chance. You can see that this one's absolutely insane with ward per second, spell crit strike chance, and spell damage all exalted on a single Ignivar's head. That's at 3% critical strike chance. I'm very, very happy with this roll. The Bone Clamor Barbute here is a kind of defensive pick. It still gives us a bunch of flat int. It gives you a bunch of dexterity. I'll show you why that's important here when we take a look at the passives, but no, this is an int stacking build that really likes dexterity as well. But it also gives a reasonable amount of armor. With 280 flat armor here, it gives us this ward per second per uncapped necrotic resistance. Compared to Peak of the Mountain, Peak of the Mountain is giving us less int, less dexterity, but still giving us other stats, which aren't useless even if they aren't great. It's giving us way more increased spell critical strike chance than Bone Clamor does, no doubt about it. Peak of the Mountain is both easier to get LP on and much more damage for your build. Ideally, we would have Intelligence on here and the increased spell crit doubled if you have over 300 max mana on this as the other T7 on here. Didn't work out. My Havoc Rune didn't hit that, and I decided to just slam it anyway. But yes, Peak is much more damage. This is much more defense. Nihilus, because why not? Skills are great. Spell damage on here, you could potentially go for spell critical strike chance. It's hard to tell which one's actually better just because our tooltip doesn't understand how much increased damage we're getting from Void, increased Void damage options. So I do think with this specific build with the Dusk Shroud, spell critical strike chance would probably be better. Speaking of which, we're wearing a Dusk Shroud. The Dusk Shroud gives up to 50% increased Void damage per fire aura. That's up to, with 10 stacks, we can maybe get up to while we're sitting and channeling and hitting something, and especially if it's hitting us. 10 stacks is kind of the high end, but pretty frequently 8 stacks. That's, up to 500% increased damage. That's a lot of increased damage, which we're really looking for because it is harder to get increased damage for Void on a mage. A lot of the options in the passive tree are for Elemental. We're losing Elemental damage over time as an affix that we can pick up, which is one of the stronger affixes in the game. So we really want that increased damage. That said, if you wanted more defenses, which are around 1,000 corruption in the monoliths, we're doing enough damage. Maybe you do want to drop some of your damage and pick up more defenses. A null portent would be great. Intelligence is more important than the increased spell crit chance. So prioritize Intelligence first. If you can get 2 LP, these are the 2 affixes you want. Next up, Red Rings, again, another defensive option. Similarly to the Bone Clamor, there is another option in this slot that just gives crit. The Phantom Grip. Phantom Grip actually also gives increased mana, which does mean you need less mana from other sources in order to hit that 300 for this increased spell crit doubled for 300 mana. So Phantom Grips are great. Phantom Grips definitely do more damage. It is much easier to get LP on them. I have a 3 LP Phantom Grip. If you could get spell damage and intelligence on here, or maybe intelligence and mana regen, because we do have a little bit of mana regen problems, that would be great. Definitely more damage, but a lot more damage taken, right? This 10% reduced damage taken is huge, especially if you wanted to switch to the Null Portent. That 20% all resistance is huge. We do like those attributes. Like I said, we're an int stacking build. Speaking of which, Orion's Belt, 25 int. What else can I say about it? We actually do kind of like the fact that we're casting Smite, just because Smites are more hits are more crits are more Embrace stacks. So we don't hate the fact that we're smiting. It's not why we're taking it. Certainly if it didn't have up to 25 intelligence, we wouldn't. The belt slot is a great spot to get mana regen if you need it. Orion's Descent is pretty easy to farm. It's pretty easy to get LP on. I have Endurance on here, and I am Endurance capped. At 2,000 health, I'm not sure if that's worth it. But we do have Foot of the Mountain, so we are getting more endurance threshold. Foot of the Mountain is specifically for these all attributes down here and the reduced mana costs. Like I said, we were having some mana problems. Disintegrate tier 3 costs quite a bit of mana. You can see we have 15 mana regen, but we still can't sustain Disintegrate. Even with the gear that we have, though, we are very close. It's like less than a mana per second that we're losing. But without Foot of the Mountain, it'd drain pretty quick. So Foot of the Mountain's giving us some defenses. It's relatively easy to get LP on, which lets us get intelligence. If you could get more, if you wanted to fight bosses, etc., you might go for some health rolls on here. I know I just said we don't have a lot of health, but I would love to get more health on this build. You can get a lot of leech while channeling, which we're picking up here, 2.1%. With the amount of damage that we're doing with Disintegrate, that's a lot of leech. We are leeching up very quickly, so health would be a great defense, especially with Reactive Horde on Mage. If you can make more health happen, I highly recommend it. Last piece of gear we're wearing here, Shattered World. Probably not surprised to see it, unless you're surprised to see it on a Disintegrate build, just because obviously this build is not the build I'm using to kill Uber Aberoth. In fact, I'm lucky enough to have somebody else kill it for me because I don't have any Sentinels. I haven't killed Uber Aberoth myself. If you don't have this, you can go with something like a Twisted Heart. Twisted Heart gives you more health, gives you more strength, to give you more armor, because you do get a fair amount of flat armor with this build. But, long story short, if you don't have a Shattered Worlds, yeah, you're going to lose out on a lot of spell critical strike chance, because we're losing that flat, you're losing that 10 all attributes that I have here. But it's not the end of the world. Like, we're going from 446 down to 327. That's a lot lost, but it's only about 20% of our damage or so. And as you saw, we have a lot of damage. This build with 20% less damage is still pretty strong. Alternatively, you could go for an Anchor or something. You wouldn't need endurance elsewhere. It has some increased void damage on it. There's a few options you can go with in this slot. If you're not using Shattered Worlds, but you're still really lucky, you could go for the Erased Mage thing for a little bit more defense on there as well. Erased Mage is great, but Twisted Heart is probably the most attainable relic that you'd put in this slot. Again, you want to go for Disintegrate. If you can get a second LP, go for more Int. We love Int. Why do we love Int? Well, let's talk about that next. We are a Spellblade, in part because Sacrificial Embrace makes playing a build that uses any spells on a mage a pain in the butt, because every spell we cast eats our stacks. So things like Glyph of Dominion, which are obviously tailor-made for standing in and channeling, especially Disintegrate, are a pain, because you want to slap down a glyph and then you want to start channeling, but as soon as you slap down the glyph, you don't have any stacks. You got to build them back up before you can cast Disintegrate. It does work. It just feels kind of gross. I didn't like it. So I decided, what else could I use to gain stacks very, very quickly? And I found Surge. Surge here will cast up to 4 Lightning Blasts every time you cast it. That's enough to hit 10 stacks instantly on a single target. So even if you're fighting a boss, you get 10 stacks. You're not getting much else out of Surge. You are getting a little bit of ward. You are invincible while you use Surge, but that's about it. We're using Surge to get our stacks. You can see Lightning Blast here is just triggered to hit things. Halo effect here for Spark Novas. Spark Charge over here. This for reflecting back on single targets. Lightning Attunement here, hoping to get Lightning Aegis. With what we're doing, we have it up fairly frequently, but it's not consistent enough to have it all the time. So it's kind of you're taking Lightning Blast, why not? But it's not a super reliable form of defense, especially against one-shots, because it's not always going to be up. That said, with Mad Alchemist Ladle and Disintegrate, we want lots of stacks of things. Oh man, I lost a lot of damage there that I didn't know I was missing. So you want your shock stacks up. These nodes are not enough. You want a bunch of ailments for Mad Alchemist Ladle. We're using static in order to consistently trigger lightning blasts, which hopefully chain an additional 4 times, which lets us hit a single target 2 additional times, just for more stacks of stuff. More sacrificial embrace stacks, more ailments, more shock, more good stuff. So that's how we're getting our stacks. That's how we're keeping them up. That's why we're Spellblade, is in part because of Surge, and Surge is an excellent way to get all your stacks back quickly while still technically traveling and becoming invincible. And then, of course, last skill we have here is Flame Ward. Flame Ward is Flame Ward. If you're playing... Oh, man. Oh, you really need all these points. Get all these points. Don't do what I did. Take this point out over here. Fire Aura is not doing any damage. Take this point. Put it here. And you'll be so much better off. But yes, Flame Ward's Flame Ward. You're gonna take it if you're a mage, or you're gonna wish you had. It's just one of the strongest builds, or strongest defensive skills in the game. Honestly, a lot of those showcases of look what I can tank. It's more of a look how strong Flame Ward is than it is, how tanky this build is. This is an insane skill. It's even more important for Disintegrate. We're going to try and stand still and channel as much as we can. There's so many more boss attacks that we can tank and continue to do damage while we have Flame Ward up. So being able to stand still, pop Flame Ward is great. We're very excited about it. We're happy to have it on the build. We wouldn't want to lose it for just about anything. Those are our skills. So knowing why we didn't go Rune Master, maybe seeing why we didn't go Sorcerer, what do we get out of being a Spellblade? And maybe why we'd go Spellblade anyway. This node right here, Prodigy. You gain ward per second scaling with your intelligence. That's pretty good. We have, 214 intelligence. That's 214 ward per second. That's good. That's really good. I'm definitely not complaining about that. But the big thing here is because we are getting we're getting 1% flat crit chance per 15 intelligence. And that is giving us probably around 15 flat crit. That's an insane amount of flat crit, especially when this node over here is also giving us 3% increased spell critical strike chance per intelligence. So with 214, intelligence, that's over 600% increased spell critical strike chance. 7 times as much. We're probably getting around, 15 flat crit from this node here. If that was the only crit we had, we'd still be, base 5 crit, so 20 times 7. We'd be 140% more with no other flat crit from any other sources, with no other increased crit from any other sources. This node is insane if you want more than 100% crit chance. And we do. We really, really do on this build. So this is why we're here. You can kind of see int, less damage taken if you've meleeed somebody recently. Surge is melee. We're using it. We can use it every 4 seconds, so you can have constant uptime on this, but you might not, like you saw in my arena. I'm sitting there just channeling for long times in a lot of cases. This node right here is also truly insane for this build. We have only around 50 dex, but with 8% increased crit chance per dex, that's over 400% increased crit chance. This dex is almost giving us as much increased crit chance as 200 intelligence is with the sorcerer node. So we're very, very happy to get that. This is definitely not a dud of a passive tree by any stretch. Even if this wasn't here, it's not a complete waste. We probably would be in a different class if it weren't for this. But it's not all wasted. We're pretty happy with what we're getting out of Spellblade. Of course, we're getting this crit chance out of the Spellblade or sorry, sorcerer here, because why wouldn't you? We are picking up these here just because we do need some plus mana to reach that 300 for that doubled spell critical strike chance. A bigger deal if you have more of it on your helmet, if you have an exalted one on your chest piece. So you ideally want to hit this, and if you're going to hit this, you might as well pick up 30 ward per second out of it, because why not? Rune Master trio over here, you can kind of see we're mostly just picking up some ward per second, some intelligence, a little bit of crit chance, and of course the thing that you always take in every single mage build, less damage taken from shock, chilled, and ignited enemies, because 8% damage reduction is 8% damage reduction. Wrapping things up, let's take a look at our blessings. Blessings are also probably what you would expect for a build like this. Increased void damage. You could instead get Spell Leech from here if you wanted to, if you don't have that idol that I have, which is, you know, increased Fire Aura stacks by Fire Aura when you crit, and Spell Leech on it, which is an excellent combo for this build. If you don't have that, you can get Spell Leech here. We're getting mana from Lagan, mostly because there aren't any other great options. We certainly wouldn't mind the... I honestly don't know. Maybe we'd go for regen, health regen, honestly. But the mana helps us reach that 300 breakpoint, which is great. All resistances, just for defenses. This build has completely ignored reduced bonus damage from crits and crit avoidance. That's probably a bad idea. But we do crit against bosses a lot. Or we do blind bosses pretty much all the time due to our static and our lightning blast. So at least against bosses, we're relatively safe as long as we hit them first. But if they hit us first, you might want to consider putting more into crit avoid and reduce bonus crit damage. I don't necessarily recommend doing what I do, but I am doing it. Armor while channeling is an obvious choice. We're also getting Endurance Threshold. Again, I'm not super clear that this is the better option. There might be other things we could get here. Maybe increased armor. There's not a lot else, though. But increased armor may certainly be a better choice, especially since we don't have a lot of strength. And, of course, if you need the physical resistance and you don't have it somewhere else, you could always pick that up. But yeah, the increased armor, we do have 30 strength, so certainly we're sitting on some increased armor as it is, making that a little bit less valuable. But I opted for the Endurance Threshold, probably a mistake, especially when we're spending so much of our time on ward. But that's the build. Like I said, if you have any questions, comments, thoughts, ideas, how to improve it, please let me know. If you're still here watching, thank you. I know this one's also long. I mentioned I droned a lot in the other one. Yeah, this is just a lot of info, I guess. I'm also probably bad at getting it across, but thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Goodbye.